Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Ruby wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. A contented smile played across her lips as she surveyed the fruits of her morning's labor. Golden loaves cooling on the rack, a bubbling pot of homemade jam on the stove, and a cherry pie waiting to be slid into the oven. "Honey, I'm home!" Ben's deep voice called from the entryway, accompanied by the jingle of keys and the soft thud of his briefcase hitting the floor. Ruby's heart skipped a beat, just as it had every day since they'd said "I do" 6 months ago. She hurried to greet her husband, smoothing her dress and tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Welcome home, darling," she cooed, rising on tiptoes to plant a soft kiss on his cheek. "How was your day?" Ben's strong arms encircled her waist, pulling her close. "Better now that I'm here with you." He breathed in deeply, savoring the scents wafting from the kitchen. "Something smells amazing. What's cooking good looking?" Ruby giggled, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Oh, just a little surprise for my hard-working man. Come, sit down and tell me all about your day while I fix you a snack." As she bustled about the kitchen, slicing bread and arranging cheese and fruit on a platter, Ruby listened intently to Ben's tales of boardroom drama and office politics. She nodded sympathetically at the right moments, offering words of encouragement and support. "You know, sweetheart," Ben said between bites of warm bread slathered with Ruby's homemade jam, "I don't know how I ever managed without you. Coming home to you, it's like a dream come true." Ruby beamed, her chest swelling with pride. "That's all I've ever wanted, Ben. To make our home a haven for you, a place where all your cares melt away." As she cleared away the dishes, Ruby's mind drifted to the life she'd left behind. The memory of Joshua felt like a distant echo, a life lived by someone else. She'd never regretted her decision to leave her studies and embrace this new identity, this new purpose. The transition hadn't been easy, of course. There had been moments of doubt, of fear. But with each passing day, as she honed her skills in the kitchen and learned the art of keeping a home, Ruby felt more and more like her true self. She thought back to those first few weeks after returning from her trip, when she'd made the life-altering decision to fully commit to living as a woman. Her mother had been surprised but supportive, taking Ruby under her wing and teaching her the domestic arts that she'd once eschewed. "Darling," her mother had said one afternoon as they folded laundry together, "are you sure this is what you want? You were always so ambitious, so driven in your studies." Ruby had paused, a freshly pressed shirt in her hands, and met her mother's concerned gaze. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Mom. This, being Ruby, being a wife, and hopefully someday a mother, this is my ambition now." Her mother's eyes had misted over, and she'd pulled Ruby into a tight embrace. "Then I'm happy for you, sweetheart. And I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Those words had meant the world to Ruby, validating her choice and giving her the strength to face the challenges ahead. Working at the Women's Center had been another pivotal step in her journey. Surrounded by other women, learning from their experiences and sharing in their struggles and triumphs, Ruby had found a sense of sisterhood she'd never known before. She'd thrown herself into learning every aspect of traditional homemaking: cooking, cleaning, sewing, budgeting. Each new skill mastered felt like another piece of her true self falling into place. The day her new identification documents arrived, officially declaring her gender as female, had been a moment of pure jubilation. Ruby had traced her fingers over the name on her new driver's license, tears of joy streaming down her face. It was real. She was real. Living with Jennifer during those early days had been a godsend. Her friend had become a mentor, guiding Ruby through the intricacies of womanhood with patience and understanding. "Remember, honey," Jennifer had advised one evening as they painted each other's nails, "being a good wife isn't just about keeping a clean house and cooking delicious meals. It's about creating a loving atmosphere, a place where your man can truly be himself." Ruby had taken those words to heart, pouring all her energy into not just the practical aspects of homemaking, but also into nurturing the emotional bonds that made a house a home. When Ben had entered her life, it had felt like the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of romantic dinners, long walks hand in hand, and late-night conversations that left Ruby dizzy with happiness. The proposal had been everything she'd ever dreamed of. Ben down on one knee in a moonlit garden, presenting her with a glittering diamond ring. Ruby's heart had soared as she'd enthusiastically accepted, already envisioning their future together. Some of her friends had raised eyebrows when she'd signed the prenuptial agreement without hesitation, but Ruby hadn't given it a second thought. She wasn't marrying Ben for his money or status. She was marrying him for love, for the chance to build a life together. Now, as she stood in their kitchen, listening to the steady tick of the clock and the distant sound of Ben's voice as he made a work call from his study, Ruby felt a sense of contentment wash over her. This was where she belonged. She glanced out the window, imagining the seaside home they'd talked about buying someday. In her mind's eye, she could see children playing in the sand, their laughter carried on the salt-tinged breeze. A large family. That was her dream, her ultimate fulfillment. The oven timer chimed, pulling Ruby from her reverie. She slipped on oven mitts and carefully removed the golden brown cherry pie, setting it on the windowsill to cool. The scent of warm fruit and buttery crust filled the air, mingling with the lingering aroma of freshly baked bread. As she began preparations for dinner, Ruby hummed softly to herself, relishing the simple pleasure of creating a meal for her beloved husband. She chopped vegetables with practiced ease, the rhythmic sound of knife against cutting board a soothing melody. The phone rang, interrupting her culinary symphony. Ruby wiped her hands on her apron and answered with a cheerful, "Hello, Thompson residence." "Ruby, darling," Jennifer's voice bubbled through the receiver. "How are you, sweetie? How's married life treating you?" Ruby couldn't help but smile at her friend's enthusiasm. "Oh, Jennifer, it's absolutely wonderful. I never knew I could be this happy." "I'm so glad to hear that, honey. Listen, I'm calling because I have some exciting news. Remember that women's social club I told you about? Well, they're accepting new members, and I thought of you right away. What do you say? Want to join me for their next meeting?" Ruby hesitated for a moment. While the idea of socializing with other women appealed to her, she was conscious of not wanting to neglect her duties at home. "I'd love to, Jennifer, but I'll have to check with Ben first. Make sure he's okay with it." Of course," Jennifer replied, her tone understanding. "Just let me know. It would be so lovely to see you there. We could catch up properly." After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Ruby hung up the phone, her mind already turning over the prospect of joining the social club. She'd have to find the right moment to bring it up with Ben, to make sure he was comfortable with the idea. As if summoned by her thoughts, Ben appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "Something smells divine in here," he said, crossing the room to wrap his arms around Ruby from behind. She leaned back into his embrace, savoring the warmth of his body against hers. "Just a little something I whipped up for my favorite person," she murmured, tilting her head to meet his lips in a tender kiss. "You spoil me. You know that." Ben chuckled, nuzzling her neck. Ruby turned in his arms, gazing up at him with adoration. "That's my job, isn't it? To take care of you? To make sure you're happy and well-fed?" A shadow of concern flickered across Ben's face. "You know you're more than just a cook and housekeeper to me, right? You're my partner, my equal." Ruby's heart swelled at his words. "I know, darling, and I love you for it. But this, taking care of our home, taking care of you, it truly makes me happy. It's what I want to do." Ben's expression softened, and he planted a kiss on her forehead. "As long as you're happy, that's all that matters to me." As they worked together to set the table for dinner, Ruby found herself marveling at the simple domesticity of it all. The clink of plates, the soft rustle of napkins being folded, the gentle hum of conversation. It was everything she'd ever wanted. Over a candlelit meal of roast chicken and vegetables, Ruby broached the subject of the women's social club. "Darling, Jennifer called earlier. She's invited me to join her at a meeting of her women's club. Would you be all right with that?" Ben looked up from his plate, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Of course, sweetheart. I think it would be good for you to get out and socialize more, just as long as it doesn't interfere with your duties here at home." Ruby nodded eagerly. "Oh, absolutely not. I'd never let anything come between me and taking care of you and our home, but you really wouldn't mind?" "Ruby, my love." Ben reached across the table to take her hand. "I want you to be happy. If joining this club would make you happy, then I'm all for it. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," Ruby breathed, lost in the warmth of his gaze. "Promise me you won't let those society women change you. I love you just the way you are. My perfect traditional wife." Tears pricked at the corners of Ruby's eyes. "Oh, Ben, you don't have to worry about that. This is who I am, who I've always been meant to be. Nothing could ever change that." Later that night, as they lay in bed, Ruby's head pillowed on Ben's chest, she found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. For this life, for this love, for the journey that had brought her here. "Ben," she whispered into the darkness. Came his sleepy reply. "I was thinking, maybe it's time we started trying for a baby. What do you think?" There was a moment of silence, and then Ben's arms tightened around her. "Really? You're ready for that?" Ruby nodded against his chest. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life. I want to give you a family, Ben. I want to be the mother of your children." Ben's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. "Oh, Ruby, nothing would make me happier. Are you sure this is what you want?" "More than anything," she assured him, her heart soaring at the prospect of motherhood. It felt like the natural next step, the culmination of everything she'd been working towards. As they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Ruby's mind was filled with visions of the future. A house full of children's laughter, family dinners around a large table, holidays spent surrounded by loved ones. It was a future so different from the one Joshua had once imagined, yet so perfectly, wonderfully right. In the quiet of the night, as the moonlight painted patterns on the bedroom wall, Ruby sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the strength to become who she truly was, for the love that had blossomed in her life, and for the bright, beautiful future that lay ahead. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Ruby stirred from her slumber. She carefully extricated herself from Ben's embrace, not wanting to wake him. Padding softly to the window, she drew back the curtains and gazed out at the world awakening. The street below was quiet, save for the occasional early morning jogger or dog walker. Ruby watched a young mother pushing a stroller, a toddler trotting alongside, and felt a pang of longing. Soon, she hoped, that would be her. Turning back to the bed, she watched Ben sleep for a moment, his face relaxed and peaceful. How different her life would have been if she'd clung to her old identity, if she'd never found the courage to become Ruby. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Shaking off the momentary melancholy, Ruby slipped on her robe and made her way to the kitchen. She had a busy day ahead, cleaning, laundry, meal prep, and of course getting ready for her first meeting with the Women's Social Club. As she busied herself with making coffee and preparing Ben's favorite breakfast of Eggs Benedict, Ruby hummed softly to herself. The rhythmic tasks of cooking centered her, bringing a sense of peace and purpose to her morning. The smell of coffee and sizzling bacon soon roused Ben from sleep. He shuffled into the kitchen, hair tousled and eyes still heavy with sleep. "Good morning, sunshine," Ruby chirped, presenting him with a steaming mug of coffee just the way he liked it, black with 2 sugars. Ben accepted the mug gratefully, taking a long sip before pulling Ruby in for a good morning kiss. What did I do to deserve you?" Ruby giggled, playfully swatting him with a dish towel. "Oh, hush you. Now sit down and eat your breakfast before it gets cold." As they ate, Ruby couldn't help but marvel at how natural this all felt. The easy conversation, the comfortable silences, the way they moved around each other in the kitchen like a well-choreographed dance. This was what she had always yearned for, even when she hadn't fully understood it.
So, big day today, huh?
Ben said as he helped clear the dishes. Your first club meeting. Nervous? Ruby paused, considering the question. A little, she admitted. It's been a while since I've put myself out there socially, but I'm excited too. Jennifer says the women are lovely. Ben pulled her into a reassuring hug. You'll do great, sweetheart. Just be yourself. They'll love you. As Ben left for work, briefcase in hand and a packed lunch Ruby had lovingly prepared, she felt a surge of pride. This was her contribution, creating a warm, welcoming home for her husband to return to each day. The morning flew by in a flurry of household chores. Ruby threw herself into her tasks with gusto, finding satisfaction in each perfectly folded towel and gleaming surface. By early afternoon, the house was spotless. A load of laundry was gently tumbling in the dryer, and a casserole was prepared for dinner, ready to pop in the oven later. With her chores complete, Ruby turned her attention to getting ready for the club meeting. She stood before her closet, deliberating over what to wear. It had to be perfect, conservative enough to fit in with the other society women, but still stylish and feminine. Finally, she settled on a pale blue A-line dress with a modest neckline and hem that fell just below her knees. She paired it with low heels and pearl earrings, a gift from Ben on their first anniversary. As she applied her makeup with a practiced hand, Ruby studied her reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back at her was softer now, more delicate than it had been in her previous life. Hormone therapy and skillful cosmetic application had worked wonders, but the real transformation she knew had come from within. Gone was the uncertainty, the feeling of being at odds with her own body. In its place was a quiet confidence, a sense of finally being at home in her own skin. A honk from outside pulled Ruby from her reverie. She hurried to the window to see Jennifer waving from her car. Coming! Ruby called, grabbing her purse and giving herself one last once-over in the hall mirror before heading out. Jennifer greeted her with an enthusiastic hug. Oh, honey, you look fabulous. That color is perfect on you. Ruby blushed at the compliment as she settled into the passenger seat. Thanks, Jen. I was so nervous about what to wear. As they drove to the country club where the meeting was being held, Jennifer filled Ruby in on what to expect. Now, don't let the fancy setting intimidate you. These ladies might seem high society, but they're really just like us. Wives and mothers trying to do their best for their families. Ruby nodded, grateful for her friend's guidance. As they pulled up to the imposing edifice of the country club, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The meeting room was a sea of pastels and pearls, filled with the gentle hum of feminine voices and the clink of china teacups. Ruby felt a moment of panic, suddenly aware of how new she was to all of this. But then Jennifer was at her side, guiding her forward with a reassuring hand on her arm. Ladies, Jennifer announced to the room at large, I'd like you all to meet my dear friend, Ruby Thompson. She's new to our little group, so please make her feel welcome. A chorus of greetings washed over Ruby, and she found herself being introduced to a dizzying array of women. There was Margaret, the club president, a stately woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Evelyn, the treasurer, who had a no-nonsense air about her but a warm smile, and dozens of others, each welcoming Ruby with varying degrees of curiosity and enthusiasm. As the meeting progressed, Ruby found herself relaxing. The women discussed upcoming charity events, shared recipes and household tips, and gossiped good-naturedly about local goings-on. It was all so wonderfully normal, so comfortingly feminine. During a break for refreshments, Ruby found herself chatting with a young woman named Alice, who was expecting her first child. "Oh, how wonderful!" Ruby gushed, her hand instinctively going to her own still flat stomach. "My husband and I are hoping to start trying soon." Alice's eyes lit up. "Really? Oh, you must be so excited. There's nothing like it, you know? The feeling of creating a life, of knowing you're going to be a mother. Ruby nodded, her heart swelling with anticipation. I can only imagine. I've always dreamed of having a big family. As the afternoon wore on, Ruby found herself thoroughly enjoying the company of these women. They were kind, supportive, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. By the time Jennifer dropped her off at home, Ruby was floating on cloud 9. She hurried inside to start dinner, wanting everything to be perfect for when Ben got home. As she moved about the kitchen, humming softly to herself, Ruby felt a sense of completeness she'd never known before. This was her life now, wife, homemaker, and hopefully soon, mother. It was everything Joshua had once rejected, everything Ruby had always longed for, and as she heard Ben's key in the lock, signaling his return home, Ruby knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. She was Ruby Thompson, devoted wife and homemaker, and she had never been happier. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.